When it comes to bass fishing, what's on your boat's deck can make all the difference. Every bait tells a story and every setup has a purpose, and I'm breaking it all down. What's on my deck? Let's dive in. Well, welcome to 2025 What's on My Deck series. Super excited for this year. If you've been a part of this, you know we go through picking nine real rod and reel combo setups with the baits, the line, the hooks, absolutely everything that I'm using for that given month. So end of January, obviously I'm not doing much fishing in Minnesota. I'm down here in Florida and I got my setups ready. And this season's gonna be great. We're going through everything. If you're a G. Loomis Shimano person, you're gonna absolutely love this stuff. We are getting into detail on it all. Maybe you're just looking for good advice on a different rod and reel, but same specs, stuff like that. And you wanna know what I'm using day in and day out on the water, you're gonna hear it here. Top of the line baits, what we're throwing, why, forward sonar, presentations, all that kind of stuff, what we're using in the grass, and you can follow me along for 12 of these episodes. And one more, I just wanna throw out there that Shield. Shield's been a partner of mine for 5-6 years now, and they signed on this year for 2025 to actually sponsor this. So you'll be able to go down in the descriptions and actually find links where applicable and follow them right over to the Shields page. And if you want to get that or get more information, or of course buy what I'm using and take it out on the water. So let's kick off 2025. This is what's on my deck. This is January. Again, we're talking Florida, so Minnesota's frozen. I had to escape the cold to get down here. We're dealing with a lot of pre-spawn. Technically it was winter in Florida. We arrived down here to 30-degree temps, snow in North Florida, crazy. I'll be going to Texas and Louisiana the month of January, maybe some spawning, a lot of pre-spawn, and that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for and attacking today. So without further ado, let's kick it off. You can't go fishing in the pre-spawn, or maybe even period, without a chatterbait. If you follow this series along, you know I use chatterbaits a lot for largemouth, smallmouth, pre-spawn, post-spawn, middle of the summer. Doesn't really matter. It's a good bait. It's a jig with a blade on it. It has a lot of crankbait tendencies. It has a lot of jig tendencies, and then its own, maybe even a lipless crankbait, just a ton of vibration, and it catches fish and it catches big ones. In this case, I'm down here in Florida, so I'm fishing a lot of shallow and thick vegetation. I'm using a G. Loomis GLX 873C bladed jig rod. Now these GLXs are fantastic rod series. They just came out in 2024. Long awaited. GLX has been a staple in the G. Loomis line since the very beginning, and this bladed jig rod is fitting absolutely all of my bills for when I'm looking for a heavier chatterbait or more vegetation, thicker vegetation, and definitely bigger fish. This is a 3-power, but it's a little bit stronger than that NRX Plus 1 that I throw, the NRX Plus 1 that I throw. In that case, that's a great rod too. A little bit longer, a little bit softer. So I like that for smallmouth, open water, any of that kind of stuff. But when I'm throwing around a heavier chatterbait, maybe 3/4, definitely half, and even down to a 3/8, but around heavy, shallow cover like down here, I'm definitely going to this 873. It's 7.3, medium heavy, and it's a good medium heavy, nice parabolic bend, a lot of backbone. The reel I'm using, Shimano Metanium HG. HG is 7-speed, so they're in a 6-speed, 7-speed, and 8-speed. Generally, rule of thumb is I'm throwing the 7-speed on almost everything that's moving in the water column that I need to control. Chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, all that kind of stuff. An 8-speed when I'm dragging. So you'll see when I'm dragging, I'm setting a big hook set, and I got to catch up to my line and get that fish out of there from that impact of that big hook set. And then some 6-speed stuff for my deeper cranking and stuff. I just like it better. I can really crank the heck out of them. But here I am running 18-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. I change that depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll bump it up to 20. Sometimes I'll bump it down to 16. But those are usually the 3 sizes that I'm using. Let's talk about the chatterbait. Big fan of this chatterbait. Always been a jackhammer guy, still am, but this is the new Z-Man Elite Evo. I have one right here. Matter of fact, they make it in a regular one and in a tungsten, which I'm super excited to play around with that more. It's got a different sound, different appeal under the water, and I also like the compact look like when it comes time for smallmouth fishing. And as my trailer here, I'm using the Z-Man Chatter Spike. Absolutely love it. Matter of fact, and we'll post pictures on here, me and my buddies were down here in the bad cold front. Each one had this Evo Chatterbait. Each one had a different trailer. One had the Chatter Spike, one had the Chatter Shad. I think another one had a Diesel minnow. And we absolutely wore them out for 2 days on that setup. Fantastic setup. So this is what I'm throwing. This is my chatterbait setup. If you're looking for a good quality chatterbaiting rod, I might also use this for some lipless cranking, spinnerbait, and it's just a great all-around reaction rod, but they definitely hit the mark for any of your heavy lifting chatterbait fishing with this GLX. Next up, the jerkbait. Jerkbait always in pre-spawn. I've always thrown a jerkbait, always been a big fan of it, but now with forward sonar, man, I never not have them on my deck, and I usually have multiples, as you'll see on my deck, for different reasons, and a lot of it is truly forward sonar. In this case, I am throwing the World Minnow. This is the Shimano World Minnow 115 SP. I love this particular jerkbait when I'm fishing around hydrilla and grass. It stays up high in the water column. Rips off that grass easy because it's up at the very top of the water column. It's got a ton of flash in it. It's got flash boost technology and then jet boost technology, which is awesome for me because when you're using forward sonar, you're trying to get a jerk bait, which sometimes can be a hard bait to throw and throw accurately or far, but more importantly accurately, and that jet boost allows me to put this thing on their head like I'm throwing a jig at them, something real easy to get at them. My setup is not to be messed with. It's my favorite jerkbait rod ever. It's a new release in that GLX line last year. This is the 822C JBR, the G Loomis GLX. JBR means jerkbait rod. It's the perfect size. It's 6'10". It's got a shortened handle, so it's not getting caught up in my bibs all the time when I'm trying to jerk it, stuff like that. Works really well, casts a mile, especially when you pair it with a Shimano Montanium 70XG, so 8-speed. I'm jerking, letting it pause, boom, they're on it, and I just want to be able to catch up to them. The rod's doing the work, so then I'm going to impart it with a, an 8-speed reel to do it. And in this case, down here in Florida, I'm going to be going over Sam Rayburn and stuff like that. I'm using 12-pound Shimano Massive Fluorocarbon. I have bumped that up to 14 and 16 if I really want to get it high. Around the grass and stuff that I'm fishing. But the Shimano World Minnow, an absolute killer when you want to keep that bait up in the water column, particularly around hydrilla and weed lakes. This thing dominates. Since we're on the jerkbait, let's just stick with another one. And this one I am in love with, and it's a brand new one. Same exact setup. I'll run through it again real quick. The G Loomis GLX 822C jerkbait rod JBR. 12-pound Shimano Massive Fluorocarbon, Shimano Montanium DC 70. This one's actually an HG. And then this is the new Shimano Zernio 115 SP, and this thing is a killer. Love this bait. It digs deep, 5-6 feet, real quick, real fast, has jet boost technology in it so I can throw it at them. I'm going to be using this thing for smallmouth on Mille Lacs. I'm using it all over the place down here. Forward sonar, when you're looking at a floater up there, a big pre-spawn floater, that's the bait to throw it. It is accurate, and you will not outcast this bait, which is also going to help, with distance and being able to get it to dive down and deflect off stuff. That's a killer bait. Super duper stoked to have this one in the lineup and working through this. So those are my two jerk baits with forward sonar. You just have to have it. Keeping a bait up on a fish is kind of a new thing that we've been able to do it, but we haven't been able to actually specifically target certain fish with it, and a jerkbait will help you with that. But we're sticking with some forward sonar baits. Let's talk about this one right here. Pinging a minnow, jigging minnow. It's winning tournaments all over the place, from little tiny minnows to big ones, and Loomis has got the best rods for this. I'm using the GLX 891S jig worm rod, okay? This is 7.5 medium light. It's got a fast tip that allow you to shake the minnow really well, but some backbone to help load into them. And I'm using a Shimano Twin Power 2500, and there's a reason for this. If you watch this series at all, or you're new to it, you should know I am a high-end Shimano reel junkie. I absolutely love their high-end reels. Big Shimano Accents guy. In this case, the Shimano Accents 4000 is the fastest pickup ratio. Great for a Ned rig, drop shot, all that stuff. But here, when I'm actually pinging a minnow or trying to keep it in their face, keep it in the target zone, I like that slow reel presentation. And the Twin Power 2500, I believe it's the FE, is the slowest gear ratio line per twist or line per turn in the high-end reel lineup from Shimano, and I really love it for these kind of presentations. You pair this package up. I'm using the 891 almost exclusively for all my minnow pinging forward sonar stuff, and I do mess with the 841, which is another new introduction that GLX line, only really offered in the GLX line, both of these rods and the jerkbait rod. Sometimes I like that shorter rod. I don't really know why or when. I think I prefer the 7.5 most of the time, but I'm still playing with it and trying to figure all that deal out. So the 841's got a lot of play for me as well, but this 891 really hard to mess with. And let's talk about the bait. I don't think I've played with so many jig heads, and I don't think I've found a better one yet than the Owner Range Roller. This is an 1/8 ounce one. I'm using a 7-inch Z-Man scented shads, big one. But again, I'm down in Texas and Florida. I'm trying to attract a bigger bite, but the polar opposite is how I tend to go, real big and real small. If I got this one going, I'm probably gonna have something like this, a real small one, maybe even a small scented jerk shads, something like that. I tend to go with the opposite ends of the spectrum when I'm doing that. So it would be the same exact setup. This is Power Pro SSV2 10-pound braid to 12-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon, and that's my setup. And pinging a minnow is awesome. Again, with forward sonar, it's a different way to fish. It's a very effective way to fish. Fish eat fish, and that's a good staple for you to really start to hone in on your forward sonar techniques. All right, next up, we're in Florida. Pre-spawn spawn, everyone knows a Cinco is absolutely deadly, whether you wacky it, whatever. But you know, a little 3/16 or 1/4 ounce weight, something like this, and this is actually a Z-Man Bang Sticks, and I love it. I've been a big Z-Man guy forever, officially part of the team now, and it's for good reason. I've been using their baits, I've been promoting their baits. My guide clients will attest to it. I put them in my What's in My Deck before. I'm a big fan of Elastec. It's the only plastic that goes back up once it's hit the bottom. And when you're dealing with murky little isolated pads and stuff in Florida, to be able to throw this thing in there to a spawning bass you can't see and have this thing stick back up in their face, it's an absolute killer. Using just a little 1/4 ounce Wu tungsten weight. Love this hook. This is the Owner Cover Shot HD, and this is a 4/0. Cheeks them every single time. Fits stuff like Cincos and Bang Sticks and worms and all that, absolutely perfect. I am running on this, one of my all-time favorite rods. I've used them before when big tournaments, those FLW days, top 10ing on Lake Kissimmee, throwing a big speed worm or something into those pads, and this is the rod I was using. This is the brand new version though. This is the G Loomis GLX 894C FPR, flip punch rod. So they have 894 jig worm rod. They have they have a 904, but they have 894 jig worm rod. Different setup. That's going to be a lighter setup, still very powerful rod, great for flipping jigs and stuff, and Texas rig worms and grass, open water, pitching a jig in wood. But when you're down here in Florida and those big old elephant ear lily pads is what got your bass in there, you'd be amazed at how hard they are to get out. And I love this rod for doing it. I can just stick them to the beans. Said this before, I'm not the biggest, strongest guy in the entire world, so I can depend on this rod to just lean back on them and pull them out of the thickest vegetation imaginable. I use these a lot, and then when I'm back home, this would be like back up in Minnesota or fishing around Champlain or anywhere else. This rod I would use a lot for, say, flipping beaver style baits and flipping jigs and stuff into lily pads or, you know, thicker emergent vegetation. This would be the rod that I would go to. And of course, like I said before, I'm using a Shimano Montanium. This is an XG 8-speed. I hit them hard with this rod, and I need to be able to get them and wench them out of there. 50-pound Power Pro SSV2 mainline, and I'm running a 20-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon leader. Ultimate setup for pitching around shallow cover. Been a staple for the G Loomis line forever. Everybody's always loved that FPR series, dating back to some of those tournaments I watched when I was a young man trying to come up in the sport with big dreams and aspirations of getting there. Staple, legendary rod series, legendary rod. What do we got next? Swim jig. Can't come down here and pre-spawn. I mean, a swim jig's just a killer no matter where you're at in the country, no matter what time it is. But this time of year down here in Florida, you can't go wrong with this. My absolute favorite setup for this. Covering water down here in Florida, immense vegetation is an absolute must, and I use a freaking stick to get them out. This is the G Loomis NRX Plus 904C MBR rod, Meg Bass rod. They are awesome reaction bait. G Loomis rods. And the NRX Plus, it don't get much better than that. Here we have the Shimano Bantam and an HG. Again, I'm using a reaction, so something I don't want to move too quick because I want to swim it through the water and all that and still try to trigger those big bites, but more importantly, move it through and kill it. That's where this swim jig and this trailer combo come in. I knew nothing about this bait, honestly, before, well, this I did. This is a Dirty Jigs No Jack swim jig. An awesome swim jig when it comes to fishing super duper heavy cover, like what you're gonna get down here in Florida. That hook's not gonna bend, you can get big fish on it. You can just put this thing in 4-wheel drive and grind it through absolutely everything. After we had success on this bait, this diesel minnow, the smaller version on a chatterbait, I loved how when they killed it, it went, because that's when you get your bites, especially on a swim jig. So I put on the bigger one on this thing. Might be the best trailer I've ever thrown on this thing. One, it stays on there forever. It doesn't slide down. It's got awesome kick, a ton of movement and action and roll. And when you kill this bait, to the bottom to get bites. The Z-Man diesel minnow with this No Jack, this Dirty Jigs No Jack swim jig, the best. 50-pound Power Pro SSV2, and like here I'm using a Shimano Bantam, again with that HG and the NRX Plus. Can't go wrong. Again, maybe not the setup I would use in Minnesota for a swim jig, or even Alabama in that grass, but when you're down here in Florida, you need a rod that's gonna help you, one, pull through the stuff, put it in overdrive, and two, get them out of the junk when they bite. Next up, a frog. You guys all know I'm a frog junkie. I absolutely love throwing a frog. I'm just gonna shoot you straight. This is the best frog setup I love for this heavy frogging stuff. I don't know if it's my favorite frog. I really did fall in love with the Berkeley Swamp Lord last year. It's a good frog, the regular frog. So I assumed that their popping frog was gonna be awesome. It's got a little drag on it. I did kind of like it when I was throwing it the other day on some of those farm ponds that are down here because they had mats and it's a heavier frog when it sit down. But for a true open water popping frog, I'd probably honestly stick to the Mollix or the Spro, but nonetheless, this would be the setup I would throw when I'm down here in Florida. Again, same rod we discussed before with the swim jig. This is the G Loomis NRX Plus 904C MBR. That's a 7.6 fast heavy action rod. I'm using a Shimano Corrado 200 XG. I want that fast again, and you need that fast reel to pull them out, but I love the big 200 size spool to help me cast this thing a long way. And I'm a 65-pound straight Power Pro, not SSV2 here. Power Pro is the OG of them all. It's been around a long time and for great reason. This stuff's strong. It casts a mile and it will absolutely cut through any lily pads and anything on that hook set or to get those fish out. So I played with different lines for that, still come back to the Power Pro, the regular Power Pro green 65-pound test, and that's the setup for throwing a frog. What do we got left? Two more. Drop shot. Again, I said it's pre-spawn, spawn time, post-spawn, doesn't ever really matter. Drop shot, whether you're just blind fishing old school style with it, fishing brush piles or forward sonaring fish, a drop shot, again, allows you to leave a weightless presentation to the fish once it gets to the bottom where you want it to be. In this case, this is an awesome rod that just came out as well. It's the G Loomis GLX 863S DSR. 822S DSR is a staple in the Loomis line. If you fished it, you love that rod. We needed something for a little bit more heavy cover and for Great Lakes fishing. Current, that was a problem for me. With current trying to set the hook, I needed more backbone. Introducing this one right here, the 863 is 7.2 extra fast, medium heavy drop shot rod. So I still use this for some of my smallmouth fishing, as mentioned, Great Lakes fishing, and we'll probably get into that a lot come this summer. But I love this thing for largemouth fishing, especially around grass and brush piles. It's got all the backbone you need, super sensitive tip, light as a feather. I pair it with a Shimano Accents 4000, 10-pound Power Pro SSV2, 12-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. I got a little 1/4 ounce Wu-Tungsten cylinder weight, and over cover shot, not to be mistaken with the cover shot HD that I was throwing on the worm rod, but instead this is the drop shot cover shot in a 2-aught. And right here I'm just using a little Z-Man SMH worm, which again, I don't know, I'll use a pink robo worm sometimes, but the more I play with the Elastic, I want the drop shot to sit out there. I love using their little like scented jerk shads, the little stuff, and anytime you can get that bait to float on a drop shot, it's what you want, and this worm just fits that bill. The hook is made for Elastec plastic too. It has a nice fluorocarbon keeper on the top, so the bait ain't sliding down, it holds it in place all day long. So this is my drop shot setup for down here while I'm in the south, and just a lot. I like that 7.2 size. It's good for me, and having that little bit more backbone is definitely nice when you're pulling a 5, 6, 7 pounder out of a brush pile, you know, over on Sam Rayburn or something. Last but not least, and I said to myself this year, I'm getting nasty with the forward sonar. I've always liked to throw big baits at big fish, but never understood glide baits. Just never gave it enough time. I'm from Minnesota. I know they bite it there, but it's just not the first place when you were growing up 15 years ago where you thought about throwing them too often. In this case, I'm not putting them down. I'm keeping one on my deck all the time. With forward sonar, the appeal of a glide bait in particular is like something I've never seen before. They're drawn to it. You get crazy follows, you see crazy big ones, and when the conditions are right and you are actually throwing the bait, you'll see why they're such a game changer. In this case, I'm throwing, this is a Phoney, actually, Phoney frogs who've been around for a long time. This is the bass snack. I'm a big believer, especially largemouth, that they just eat their young. They eat small bass all the time. I've had them spit it up. Some of the best bass stories I've ever heard from people involve them catching a fish and the biggest bass of their life, eating that one. I just don't think they're afraid, and that's why Phoney called this one the snack bass. It's an awesome one. The rod don't get much better. This is the G Loomis IMX Pro 966 SWBR. Handles baits like this and even bigger with ease. Long cork handle. I put this thing underneath my armpit and work this bait right. I'm using a Shimano Corrado 300 HG, 300 size spool. I can fit a lot of 25 pound, and in this case I'm using Seeger and Vizex. I like 25 pound test on this stuff, and the Mastiff only comes up to 20 right now. So this is Seeger and Vizex 25 pound fluorocarbon. And again, that rod reel combo is great. When you have a bigger reel like this in a 300 size, it really allows you to throw these better and with more accuracy and let the bait land softer with the bigger spool. You got bigger guts on the inside of these reels to be able to handle just the ounces that these baits can weigh. And then of course, when you got the right rod with it, it's mainly to handle the bait. I mean, obviously once you get the fish on, it's pandemonium. It's just try to get that thing in. It's a big presentation in their mouth, but to be able to handle the bait is something that I've just learned here in the last year was a big part of my problem, and something you guys will hear from me a lot. So on this one, awesome bait. I like the high end. I like these high end swim baits, but there are plenty of good $30 swim baits out there. Again, check all the links below. And to get into it, just a couple things here. You know, this is the bait that I was talking about, the bang sticks. We showed you the Chatterbait. Here's that diesel minnow, comes in different sizes. Just big fans of that. I've done videos on using scented shads before. That's nothing new. They've been catching fish all over the place. But some of these bigger sizes, this red bone color pre-spawn is absolutely one of my favorites. And yeah, and you just got to keep a big scoping box like this, because when you're pairing stuff like this up, you need different jig presentations for different things. And in here I keep all my different jig heads. I got range rollers, different off the brand ones, stuff from Shield, stuff from Japan, all over the dang place. But you can just see, you know, keeps everything in here and organized. It's my scoping box, and just something that you know, that for me, that's the big game is once you start trying to perfect a new technique, like we got to do with forward sonar, and that's the way it's going, is then it opens up a whole new world, because you're learning so much as you're going along, things you're doing right, things you're doing wrong, and just different ways to present them. So now it's all about a lot of terminal options to be able to match that hatch so perfectly and drop that cast so perfectly, usually results in some pretty awesome endings. So that's my deal. That's this month, January. That's what I'm throwing. Of course, we always have more, and I'm going to keep rotating through them all the time. I always change my mind. That's part of growing and learning. trying to learn new techniques, never satisfied, something can always be better, and I'm going to give you all of that straight from the cat's meow on this stuff. And I appreciate you all tuning in. Subscribe to my channel so you can stay on these. They'll be coming monthly at the end of every month. And please, again, follow the links below and check out some of these great baits and great stuff that we're promoting and throwing out here on the water. Tight lines. See you guys in February.